We're good? All right. Welcome back to Red Scared, everybody. It's been a time, but I've been busy the last couple of weeks. My process of moving out has been delayed a little bit, but whatever. We're going to make the most of the time I have here. And I wanted to make the most of the time I had here by covering a Canadian topic, right? I know I mainly focus on American politics, but I live in what is referred to as the Great White North, and two of the members of PVN are Canadian, me and ADC. And, it would be unfair if I just basically framed all the issues the West has from the same American perspective as I've been. Well, I'm not American, so I don't have an American perspective. I just cover American issues. But today there's a very special topic I wanted to touch on. Now, we've all talked about censorship at one point or another. Censorship takes on many different forms. Sometimes people will misconstrue very reasonable regulation as censorship, and sometimes people will disguise blatant or soft censorship as regulation. It all depends on how you frame it. Now, for a few years now, Canada has been flirting with the idea of very soft censorship. And I'm going to show you guys something that will basically introduce the topic. There's a Canadian YouTuber. His name is JJ McCullough. McCullough? It's a weird name. He's a very, very, very moderate conservative Canadian YouTuber, and I obviously I'm not a conservative myself. However, he does do his best to at least be impartial, and what he tries to do, because he doesn't subscribe to the Canadian Conservative Party or the PPC at all for their very homophobic views, because he happens to be a gay Canadian YouTuber, and he's very conflicted about that kind of stuff. So don't worry, he's very separated from the mainstream conservative political narrative that's been taking place in Canada, the rise of the far right. And he has covered this topic before, basically discussing how the Canadian government is trying to disguise what they call reasonable regulation. They're trying to disguise censorship as very reasonable regulation, or at least in their eyes, it's reasonable. So I'm going to go ahead and share it with y'all. Just give me a moment.
Bill C-11 is the Canadian government's plan to make YouTube more patriotic. The Canadian government thinks that Canadians are watching too many foreign videos when what they should be watching are good, patriotic Canadian videos. So this law would force YouTube to rig its search functions and recommendations to push more Canadian videos on Canadian users. But not just any Canadian videos, because the government would also gain the powers to set the standards for whether a video is Canadian enough to get boosted. They would force YouTube to analyze whether a video explicitly talks about Canadian topics or political issues, or features Canadian people and places, and only boost those. In other words, it could soon be a lot harder for Canadian YouTube users to find and watch videos they want, and for Canadian creators to get their videos boosted by the algorithm, unless they have the same taste in videos as the Canadian government. No country on earth has ever regulated YouTube this way. If you're a Canadian who likes YouTube the way it is, tell your favorite Canadian YouTuber to join those of us trying to stop Bill C-11. Bill C-11 is
All right. So, JJ McCullough is a very popular Canadian political YouTuber, and he, like I said, he's covered bills like this in the past. He does a very good job, in my opinion at least, of very much separating his political beliefs, which are very, very moderate, from the objective reality of these legislations that he has reviewed in the past. And I thought that even though he's covered this before, even though he may be a conservative and I may be a hard leftist, I think it is very important that we do not allow the topic of censorship to simply be a partisan thing in Canada. Like I said, McCullough has separated himself a lot from the mainstream conservative politics of Canada. Thank God, because the mainstream conservative politics of Canada have become nothing but very culture war-esque bigotry and, Trumpist and just very far-right and fascistic. He, if anything, embodies what a lot of people thought of Canadian conservatives in the era of, say, pre-Stephen Harper, or when Stephen Harper was elected or something like that, where even though I really don't like conservatives, there is a very big difference in how the conservatives have, they've changed a lot over the last 10 or 20 years in Canada. And they've been some of the most vocal people on this legislation. Now, we, of course, in Canada, because we're a very neoliberal country, we like to pass off anything that people bring up in terms of censorship or state overreach as a Canadian issue, because we lump in people who are concerned with this country's future, with this country's, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We lump in people who are concerned with those things being violated with people who are simply anti-government and anti-Trudeau and pro-conservative and pro-far-right and all that kind of stuff. And while I do understand it because of the absolute craziness that happened in Ottawa with the truckers' protest, it's still unethical. Whether the Conservatives like to appropriate, leading the charge against censorship and all that kind of stuff or not, I think is a tad irrelevant here. Because yes, conservatives only really care about censorship, or at least modern conservatives only care about censorship because they want to be able to get away with saying and, spewing whatever kind of horrible prejudice or garbage that comes out of their mouths and get away with it, right? They, a lot of Canadians don't like that. They don't want a lot of Canadians, mainstream Canadians who are not these ultra conservatives, they want to preserve Canada's image as a quote unquote nice place or nicer place compared to America, where that kind of horrible, vile garbage is not allowed here. And we will do anything we can to keep it out, even at the cost of the personal freedoms of everyone in Canada. Now, I do not believe that state censorship is the solution to combating the far right. I believe, building a far left coalition and improving material conditions and destroying the appeal that far right conservatives have, I believe that's the answer. And somebody who is going to help me demonstrate this perspective is a good comrade of mine. You'll know him from PVN. He lives in Alberta. He is the second Canadian we have on our panels. Everyone give it up for ADC, Angry Dad Canada, from the left, white, north. Hello, comrade. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly, comrade. How are you doing this Saturday?
I am doing very good this Saturday. We are covering Bill C-11 and Bill C-10. Now, before I go ahead and move forward with the topic of Bill C-10 and Bill C-11, please understand that our government is horrible with naming legislation. All right? There's 25 letters in the goddamn alphabet, and there are an infinite amount of numbers. And yet, the government has decided to name 3 different pieces of legislation Bill C-10 in the last 20 years. So if you look up Bill C-10, you're going to get a lot of mixed results, and it's going to confuse people. I think that may be intentional, but I'm not going to speculate too much on that. So, ADC, you and I have both researched this topic, but you have obviously dabbled in the arena of state censorship and freedom of speech and, state propaganda and all that kind of stuff. Could you please explain to the audience what Bill C-10 and Bill C-11 are and what is the intention behind them?
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah. Unfortunately, we have had vast experience with the censorship, especially here in Alberta, speaking out against the current elected government. So the acts are pretty similar. Basically, you've got the same act twice. What Bill C-10 was put into place was to carry on with the Broadcasting Act, which was put into place in 1991. And the government is claiming, because it was in 1991, pre a lot of the internet that we see today, a lot of things were not covered in that existing act. So when we're looking at those sort of aspects, this is pre-Facebook, this is well, I mean, it's pre-everything, basically it's pre-computer. But so their goal is to, their goal is to increase Canadian content. And as someone who's worked in commercial media prior to shifting left to the independent side, there's always been a push by our governments to really push that CanCon, is the industry term, which is Canadian content. Radio stations are forced to use at least 30% CanCon on air. So if you're listening to a local radio station in Canada, 30% of the hour has to be filled with Canadian content. That doesn't include commercials. It doesn't include your news programs. It only includes your music. If you're designated as a news talk station, then of course your information is going to be included in that 30%, and it has to be considered in the maple side, which means your artist, where the production was taking place. So it's funny because there's Canadian artists that aren't considered CanCon, that don't get the airplay that other American or international artists do, because of the fact that they were under the guise of the Maple or the CanCon certifications. So there's like, I believe it was Metallica that did a album in Vancouver, BC. And so some of that album was considered CanCon because of the fact it was recorded, produced, and edited in Vancouver and then distributed in the United States. So having those sorts of things, that's where you have that. This is considered Canadian content. Now, getting back to the Bill 10 and the Bill C-10, Bill C-11, and not the one that was done in 2006 and not the one that was done this year, the actual one that everyone's focused on, which is that Online Streaming Act. So the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is the Friends of Broadcasting. So do a little research on that group, and it looks like it's a group of industry experts that are pushing for more Canadian content. The concern that I have, and I believe you have as well, Comrade, is the fact that what constitutes a Canadian content, and it's this push of not only are they pushing the Canadian content, but it's a control of Canadian content, and that's where we get that censorship piece coming into play. Because as we both know, and we mentioned on the panel shows earlier, about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's fight against what he calls extremist language and extremist groups. But what he constitutes as that extremist behavior is anyone who is against the establishment or against the government. So you and I are actually extremists in the definition, according to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, which then has the RCMP and CSIS that could be monitoring this exact conversation based on the fact that we are speaking out against a decision made by the Liberal government and our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So that's where we have that concern there, the really big concern, because as we've seen with our American counterparts, especially the bigger names like the Jimmy Dores and the Chris Hedges and Lee Camps, who have been censored through not only YouTube, but any other American-owned media conglomerate, online or otherwise, that just opens that door. So if we're saying our prime minister, or the heritage ministers, as they use here, has control of what's considered Canadian content, then they can decide which Canadian content they're going to push forward. And you and I know, in recent years, what used to be our public broadcasting system, which was the CBC, has now become a giant bullhorn for the Conservative Party and right-wing idealists. What used to be a very centrist or very centered liberal stance, and we use liberal as that do nothing sort of stance, use both sides, has now become a one-sided thing, and it's a lot of anti-Justin Trudeau, anti-liberal rhetoric.
Yeah, it's
But
very. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
ADC is. I want to make something very quickly for very clear for everyone, and then I'll let you finish your point in a second. The CBC, like he said, is our public broadcasting network. Now, a lot of people would disagree with the whole notion that the CBC has become conservative, but hear me out. Just because the CBC doesn't openly endorse certain conservative views, it doesn't mean that they don't constantly give the conservatives very much, they give them a lot of coverage. They give Pierre Poilievre, or whatever he is, they like to give him more of a platform sometimes by being like, oh, look, here's the new conservative leader. They constantly give attention to all the truckers and whatnot that came marching up on Parliament and causing a ruckus. However, when it comes to issues that affect the common Canadian working class, when it comes to the people fighting on the ground trying to unionize, when it comes to the First Nations people who still don't have clean water in a lot of their reserves across this country, when it comes to the activists from the wet C-10 people who are being continuously harassed by the RCMP, when it comes to all that stuff, the CBC tends to give way less attention to those issues and more attention to anti-government stories, because the CBC is just willing to go along with whatever far-right populist narrative is going on in Canada, because we have a dilemma in Canada. The ruling class of Canada has a dilemma. We cannot end up like the Americans in terms of there being a CNN and a Fox News and just putting those two people against one another. If we allowed this country to become, as openly polarized as the United States, then that would lead to instability. The United States is a completely different story. So what the CBC does is that they subtly try to play both sides and act as if they're very impartial. They are not. So nobody be fooled by the CBC claiming to be impartial at all. It is very disgusting. So ADC, please continue.
So we go to the CBC. I mean, a lot of rhetoric, and it's funny because the fact that the supporters of the Conservatives, the CBC, were the ones that were being fought against when former Prime Minister Stephen Harper was in play and wanted to defund the CBC and basically privatize it. They realized that that wasn't going to fly, because privatizing just, you have to have this, I would say, facade. Yeah, basically, you've got old people that still believe in the Beachcombers and the Fifth Estate. And Fifth Estate, mind you, does do some good coverage, but these guys have been watching the National at 10 o'clock since before we were born. So you want to continue to keep those people, because those people are currently the ones that hold the purse strings in the country of Canada. Yes, there's some Gen Xers. Yes, there's some millennials that have money, but the majority of the money is coming from the boomers and those older, the generation before them. And that's who funds the CBC. That's who promotes
They make up the
this whole.
majority of the viewership.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what they cater to. So as Fox News caters to the right and CNN caters to the centrist, CBC caters to the old person. And most old people are, I mean, just because Canada is supposed to be this nice country, we're not.
But
We're
they
as
think it is, and the CBC provides them with that perspective.
and as you can tell right behind me, this is the funniest part about having the conversation with the CBC. If you look behind me, it's a Hockey Night in Canada logo, which is iconic. It's not the most iconic logo; it was the newer logo. But the banner behind me was actually, it's actually historic here. And I've never told this story before because keep this one aside. This is probably one of my most prized possessions of memorabilia. So this banner behind me was used for the CBC broadcast from the last game at Maple Leaf Gardens between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Chicago Blackhawks. It's actually got the writing of the CBC employee on it. It hasn't been certified, but it basically was one of the banners that was hung up at Maple Leaf Gardens. So as a Canadian growing up watching Hockey Night in Canada every Saturday, this is huge for me. I'm not a Leaf fan at all, but having something that iconic is whatever. But it's also a reminder of that capitalism piece of what has become Hockey Night in Canada. Because Hockey Night in Canada, yeah, you can still see it on the CBC in about 45 minutes while we're recording this. But the majority of your good games are actually played on Rogers Sportsnet. And it's Rogers and it's Bell Corporation of the TSNs and the Rogers that get the main coverage of the sport because they can make more money off it. Going back to that whole thing of they can take the CBC's best and move it onto a Rogers or move it onto a TSN. You saw it in the Olympics. You saw it on anything that's driven by capitalism. Any of the talent that we grew up watching on a public broadcaster has all been moved to the private broadcaster. And that's where you lose that's where the blur comes in. So we're not seeing it quite yet in regards to the Fox News, CNN, CNBC like it is in the States. But I can tell you straight up, when there's any sort of frustration causing speech or any sort of address by the Liberal government or Prime Minister Trudeau himself, all the stations so in Canada we have the CBC Newsnet, which is their 24-hour news station, but there's also CTV News something or other. They've changed the name three times.
CTV News, yeah.
And that's owned by Bell, which is corporately driven, but the same messages. I mean, like when we look at the last federal election, it was announcers from all stations, so Global, Bell, which is your CTV, and your CBC, all had representation in that leadership debate. And all of them will have each other on their shows. So what used to be this public broadcast, like very, very much when we were growing up, the CBC was very much like PBS used to be. PBS has been destroyed. It was decimated by Trump. Everyone knows this. Yeah, there's still some good programs on PBS, but it's a lot of stuff that is not. It's a lot of more mainstream driven stuff. Any of the stuff that you're looking at watching, you have to go and find independent sources to do that. So going back to the point of where our big thing is YouTube. So number one, for you and I, comrade, if we're broadcasting by ourselves, this doesn't affect us. Where it affects us is the People's Voice Network. So coming in under a network, this is where we're affected. They say because we're individuals, we're not affected, but I can tell you straight up that, and we're seeing it already, any stuff that speaks anything in regards against that Western propaganda of a pro-Ukraine stance is being muted or being censored.
Yeah.
And so they're already starting that. So what is going to stop the Canadian government from making this episode Barry and then promoting something, even if it's a CBC, even if it's CTV, that are considered Canadian broadcasters, but they're funded by capitalism. They all have ad revenue. Like we're talking billions of dollars of ad revenue to these organizations that can just put out the best stuff. They're not just you and I with
they have huge production budgets.
Huge production budgets. They've got huge teams, which is great in regards to employment in Canada, but not great in regards to being able to share a message. Because you and I are never going to be on the CBC News.
Oh no,
they're
never. They're never.
Or CTV or anything like that. Or if we are, it's going to be based on this is what they showed before. Blah blah blah. Where the investigation came through. Like controversial side there. I don't know if you saw what happened to the gentleman in New York who's arrested the suspect in the shooting in the subway. So he had a channel that was very anti-mayor, anti-capitalism, very much against the treatment of the people in poverty and the houseless in New York. And so that was all spewed when he was the prime suspect in this incident. Every media outlet had the same story. So very similar to like we were saying about CTV and CBC and Global all having the same take. It's not going to be like the days of having Walter Cronkite and just telling us the news every night are gone. It's going to be skewed towards what of the basically your advertorial, where your capitalism, your ad revenue is driven, what is going to be the thing that drives it the most. So if it is going to be a huge if it's going to be someone who is anti-Trudeau, then that's going to be the push. If it's going to be something that's going to be pro-oil, then that's going to be the push. And we just see it, like what we have for media. I mean, thankfully we have folks like us, not to toot our horns or whatever, but all of our members and all of our comrades in the People's Voice Network, all of our comrades in the RBN, the Revolutionary Black Network. There's a lot of us that are on the socialist, communist side, providing a left voice, but that voice is being censored. Truly.
Let me try to shed some different kind of light on this. So essentially, the number one thing I'm concerned with here is, well, like we said in the beginning, I know we kind of like dove into Canadian media and stuff like that, but this does matter in terms of that, because this isn't outright censorship, so the Canadian government can get away with it. Outright censorship by the Canadian government would be ordering YouTube to straight up delete or police any content that is considered anti-Canadian. So they soften it up a bit. There's always been this perception in Canada that Canadian media doesn't get enough attention. And whether that is true or not, it should not be up to the state to decide what Canadian media is defined by, or what is, the Canadian government should not be trusted with what should pass as Canadian content. Because for a fact that the state is not going to approve any Canadian content that is anti-state or more left than the country usually is. My content is not going to be promoted alongside, say, even if PBN or I had like thousands and thousands and thousands of followers and subscribers. If I make content that is, say, touching on the issues of the Trudeau administration failing to uphold their promise on giving free water to the First Nations people, for example, and how they should be ashamed of themselves, or if I call out the NDP for selling themselves out and signing a pact with the liberals. If I criticize the government, why the hell would the government uplift criticism of itself? It won't. Any foreign content. I don't understand. Like, do people not understand how a tad xenophobic that sounds? Because it's not just American content that we see in Canada that's very popular. You know, videos from all over the world. That's what YouTube is for. And to tweak the algorithm so that the algorithm promotes, not shuts out, but just not promote anti-Canadian government content and uplift pro-Canadian content. It's very intellectually dishonest. Well, not intellectually dishonest, like just
straight up dishonest.
Yeah, straight up dishonest, because this country's not perfect. And a lot of Canadians are waking up to that nowadays, because we've had so many problems that have not only existed in this country for a while, but they have been revealed in recent years. We are still, unfortunately, digging up the bones of all those children that were tortured and killed and buried beneath residential schools by the Canadian government and the Catholic Church, who attempted to cover it up. There is not an official body count yet, but I am pretty sure the number is around 9,000.
Higher.
Higher, yeah.
Higher than that, yeah.
It's going to continue to get higher because we haven't even searched half the schools yet. When this came out, it was horrifying. And mark my words, even though the majority of the Canadian public isn't really talking about it that much anymore now, trust me, when the number becomes unignorable again, when it starts getting so high that even the Canadian media is like, okay, yeah, we can't just sweep this under the rug anymore, it's going to make news again. And when it does, it's going to be horrifying. Not only that, the truckers represented Canada's far right and how strong they truly were. How they shut down the country for basically 3 whole weeks. And even though we basically arm our police departments, at least as you said in Edmonton, with the budget of a small army, for some reason we couldn't remove these guys from the capital. Not that I advocate for the pro-capitalist state having the authority to just, declare a protest illegal. But my point still stands. Canada's image as this nice, perfect Western utopia, Scandinavian, American-esque utopia that sits in the Great White North, even though, we're not that north. It sits in the Great White North. We are not perfect. And it is very clear that the Canadian government wants to ensure that Canada's image as this really nice place is upheld. So they're like, hey, YouTube, give us the ability to promote the kind of content we want so that we can continue to put out our image to the rest of the world. And this image is very powerful. You talk to people overseas, and a lot of them do very much like Canada and prefer it to, say, Europe or the United States. People have their preferences. And while I don't want to shit on any hopes or prospects of, say, families who come from very destroyed countries in the global south who want to escape poverty and escape war and stuff like that and settle in Canada, because we do have a lot of immigrant families who flee to Canada for that reason. While I'm not trying to say that, don't come here, I'm trying to say be careful, because we are not the paradise that we say we are. And this content is clearly trying to promote a false image of Canada. Canada is not nice. And furthermore, this is blatant hypocrisy on our part, because while we just endorse soft authoritarianism in Canada, we also have firmly, as a country anyway, firmly taken the side of the West in the new Cold War that we have found ourselves in against China and Russia. Geez, I wonder, this seems fucking familiar. Now, we shit on the Chinese government constantly for state censorship and media control. We constantly shit on them for censoring political opposition or cracking down on protests or just not allowing certain kinds of content into the country. It's one of the reasons why I say big companies like Disney are getting more and more criticism, because they're very soft with, say, their LGBTQ representation in their media, because that shit doesn't fly in China, and they have to make it according to Chinese regulators and stuff like that. We constantly shit on China for this kind of stuff, What the fuck do y'all think this is? What is this? The Chinese government promotes pro-Chinese content, pro-CCP content? What the fuck do you think the Canadian government is doing here? Yeah, we're not shutting off social media and, kicking out all social media platforms where people can voice their concerns and, cracking down on media as hard as China is. But goddamn, this is pretty fucking close. This is, treading into that territory. And if the government is allowed to pass this legislation with little to no opposition from the Canadian public or opposition in Parliament in general, do you have any idea how much of a bad precedent that sets? It means that the Canadian government can and will, in the future, pass legislation like this more and more and more often in the name of protecting Canada's image or, trying to promote pro-Canadian content. And it is a damn shame that we are so drawn to our image of a perfect country. We have allowed the Conservatives to control the narrative on censorship. I don't want to be lumped in with a bunch of far-right fascists who are complaining that they can't say the N-word out loud. I don't want to be lumped in with a bunch of people who are, complaining all the time about how there's too much diversity on television. I don't want to be lumped in with those people because I fucking hate those people. But the fact of the matter is, we need more non-conservative opposition to Bill C-10 and Bill C-11. This is a blatant attempt by the Canadian government to very much sterilize Canadian media. And let me tell you all this, just for anybody out there who still thinks that, the only people this will affect will be those, far-right conservative, like right-wing nut jobs that we saw in Ottawa. No. You want to know why? The First Nations people. What about them, huh? If the First Nations people have anything that's, less than kind to say about the Canadian government, as they should, how can we trust the Canadian government to label First Nations content that happens to condemn the Canadian government? How can we trust them to label that content as Canadian? How can we trust them to do that? We can't. Because what is considered Canadian is what appeals to Canadian nationalism. And Canadian nationalism is what is going to destroy this country. We cannot allow this bill to happen, to pass, basically. And it has affected everyone, from folks at PVN to people like ADC before he joined PVN to people all over this country. Our media is becoming slowly but surely more corporatized. And one more thing before I hand it off to ADC for the next rounds of questions. When we make the difference between the private sector and the public sector, we have to understand that the public sector is just a soft private sector. You see, I'm not even it's sad, but it's true, because there's the private sector, which is blatantly and openly privatized media, right? But we refuse to understand that those same gigantic corporations also have bought out the loyalty of every single MP in Parliament, right? And this is especially scary because when the MPs in Parliament are supposed to be in charge of the affairs of the public sector, it's no longer the fucking public sector if the people who are in control of the public sector are controlled by the private sector, all right? So whereas the CBC used to be, very much public sector related and, non-corporatized, it is very clear that the private sector still has always had control over these networks. Because as long as you live in a capitalist society, the private sector will always control everything the government does. They will control the status quo. And essentially, there is no such thing as a public sector. And as capitalism starts to get worse and we progress into late stage capitalism where the profit motive leads to worsening material conditions for the working class, the private sector will make the state shift in whatever direction it needs to go, and it will make necessary sacrifices in order to maintain nationalism, pro-Canada nationalism and stuff like that. So they will start openly corporatizing Canada's media networks and stuff like that. That's what ADC was referring to earlier. All these events being covered by these by these big corporate conglomerates that just make so much profit. It's unbelievable. So, yeah, there is no public sector under capitalism. We only think there is. So go ahead, ABC. What do you have to say about, the motivations behind passing Bill C-11 and Bill C-10?
Well, 100% will go back to, like you said, that there's no public sector. It's a private sector. So, and it was on purpose. So you go back to the history. We'll just take a look at the history of CTV, which CBC was the original public broadcaster. CTV was started in 1961. It was started privately, but it was started as a secondary because more homes were getting TVs. It was another option for people to watch different programming. Absolutely. And then you had more jobs because they could open more stations, and it wasn't based on the budgets of the federal government on how much money could be paid to this. So it was privately owned, but it was more community owned. And so while it was privately owned, but as community owned station, I mean, I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan, and we had our CTV station in Regina, but there were CTV stations in Yorkton, where my parents have outside Yorkton, where my parents have a farm right now. And all across the province, I mean, yes, you got basically the same news program at your noon and your 6 or whatever, but you would also have updates and weather and that those sort of things. It wasn't until 2000 when Bell Globe Media purchased CTV. So it was under private broadcasting, and it was privately owned. There was Bayton Broadcast Corporation that owned the overall banner of it. If Bayton Broadcast seems like a very familiar name, if you remember, the Toronto Blue Jays' first owners were the Bayton Broadcast Corporation prior to it going to Rogers and Ted Rogers' family buying it. So when we watched Blue Jays baseball in the 80s and then the 90s, it was the Bayton Broadcast Corporation that did it. We owned the CTV. Basically, we were watching CTV, but it was owned by them. So, not to say that private ownership was bad, but it gets into that conglomerate ownership, and that's where we're running into now. So, not necessarily, I'm not against private ownership, because there's been some really good startup stations that when they were privately owned, they were actually good. They actually didn't just fall into line with the rest of them. But the problem is they run into the fact that you can only stay funded for so long before you have to go into grants, or you have to go into the public sector to fundraise to stay on the air.
I think there's a not simple solution, but I think there is a simple solution to that. Because while you're right, somebody who is smaller starting up a broadcasting network, that's technically privatization. At least they're able to put the money into something to compete with larger Canadian media. However, we still live in a capitalist system. So what happens is that your profits grow and grow and grow, and you have to keep them growing, lest inflation slowly but surely in a generation or two eats away at your fortune and you're left with nothing. Or you decide, God forbid, to get a bunch of investors who become shareholders in your company, and you got to please them by constantly raising profit margins. And, raising profit margins means sacrificing your integrity, especially in the media. Now, public sector, ask for government money. You want to go public, whatever. But unfortunately, you got to kiss the ass of the government in order to receive public funding. Not only that, but the government serves the same corporations that you tried to escape. So there is no fucking escape. However, a good solution to this, in my opinion, is to basically collectivize the media. We talked in the past on other panels where we've talked about worker co-ops, and we talked about worker-controlled industry. And that I want to say, as much as we shit on Western media, I want to make it clear that there are still people who want to go into journalism because they believe in the fifth estate. They believe of holding the government accountable. They believe in bringing the truth to the people. However, because at the end of the day, everything is controlled by these very powerful, basically Canadian oligarchs, they can only do so much. And eventually they have to assimilate into the machine, become cogs in the machine. However, those people are working class people, are average Joes like you and I. And like I said, average Joes don't have the same financial incentive to hoard money like that. Average Joes, when they democratically run an industry, are not incentivized to hoard the money in offshore accounts or in assets or buy out the loyalty of the government. No, average Joes are incentivized to actually pay their taxes to the country that they live in, to pay for the public services that they use to get to work, like public transportation. Average Joes, who would be the journalists and whatnot, and say the sports commentators or any political commentators running these networks, if they did, it would be a much ethical way of, at least until we make that transition to socialism, it would be a much more ethical way of running media if it was just collectivized. So I think that's the missing link in what you're talking about, because you discuss when it starts out, as privatized. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because at least you could use whatever small amount of capital you use to compete with larger Canadian media and eventually, become something bigger. But the bigger you become, the more corrupt you become. It's natural. It's the natural progression of capitalism. I think collectivization or the democratization of media and collective worker control over the industry of, news media, especially in a country like Canada, I think that could be the missing piece to the puzzle. I don't know what you feel about that, so I'm going to let you chime in there.
Well, I think you have a good point, and absolutely, I'm all about the co-op and the worker-owned, worker-directed organizations. So, number one, I think that's a great idea in theory. Unfortunately, because I've seen it happen, and it just happened in regards to a online company that just sold to a huge conglomerate. So, what happens, because it's capitalism? And our comrade Rome was on with Rob and Ryan on their call-in podcast last night, and I listened to it. And Rome from the RBN, he stated, he goes, what we need to, number one, we have to blow up the capitalist system. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We all agree on that. Yeah. But the problem we run into, and what you're seeing in the States with the AOCs, what we're seeing here in Canada with the Jagmeet Singhs. Jagmeet Singh could have been a huge, tremendous, amazing leader. He could have been Jack Layton if he wasn't a capitalist puke, because the fact that he wanted to be a TikTok star, he wanted the fucking clout. He cashed in his chips and partnered with Trudeau. He'll still take his performative bullshit shot in Parliament at Trudeau saying, oh, our prime minister needs to listen to this, that, and the other thing, while he's kissing his ass in this coalition. He's not doing anything. So basically what you did is you cut any sort of attempt to affect change in government. You've cut it off at the frickin' knees because you're a capitalist pig like Trudeau, like fucking Pierre Pepe Le Pew there, who's running Polivier. Yeah, I mean, he's in Alberta. It's giant COVID spreaders here. Like, he's basically doing Trump rallies. He had 5,000 to 7,000 in Calgary 2 nights ago. Last night he had close to 10,000 in Edmonton. Like, it's just disgusting, this person and these people that believe in it. And the problem what we're facing now is the fact that, and it frustrates the fuck out of me, the left need to get rid of propping up the celebrity bullshit that are centrist, that's who we're going to join, that's who we're going to come together with. Okay, absolutely. Bernie was a needed thing to get everyone to come together in regards to the socialist side. But now it's time for Bernie to fuck off. It's time for AOC and the squad to fuck off. And time here in Canada for the NDP to go fuck themselves, because they're doing nothing. They're centrists. They're just centrists. So we have a conservative capitalist prime minister and Trudeau, he's not fucking liberal. Liberal was left aside when he went sliding to the right. I mean, I said it in the first episode of Left, White, North earlier this week, is the fact that these centrists will move to fascism because it doesn't affect the bottom line. Fascism allows capitalism, and that's where we're running into. So until we can actually come together on a cooperative of and have a leader, it can't be. I mean, it could be you or me. I mean, who knows? Whatever. I don't want to lead. I want to be part of the leadership. I want to be part of a change. But whoever it is that leads our actual movement, be a revolution, be it a I like how Lee Camp put it, being it a instead of being climate change, be it a climate revolution. That's what we need. It's not about the torches and storming the castle. It's about gaining our control of what's going to happen to this environment before it all goes away and we're all dead.
Let me go back to the question of media for a second there. You said how worker-controlled industry sounds good, but you said that there's a reason why it could possibly not be that good.
Yeah, I went on a tangent there. Yeah, so what how Rome was is the fact that we need someone who isn't comfortable being rich, who isn't comfortable playing with the elite. Yes, you got to have that seat at the table with the elite to work away from this capitalist system. The only way we're going to do it is if we come to the table. I mean, it's just like the only way we're not going to have war is if we actually have discussions and an actual conversation of peace. So we have to have a peace talk with these people to make this an actual living society for everyone. Now, what happens and what I've seen in, especially in the independent media, is you get comfortable in that capitalist lifestyle. Then you turn your back on your socialist brothers that were there, or the independent people that were with you. If you get a taste of the riches, you don't want to go back. And it's that whole pie analogy of there's only so much pie. And my wife and I have this conversation all the time. You know what we say when you say there's only so many pieces of pie? Fuck you, bake a cake. We don't need pie all the time. Bake a cake, bake some cupcakes. I love cinnamon buns. Let's make a bunch of baked goods instead of just one pie.
I think we're forgetting an important element of this because, well, I think the solution to what we're talking about, because once again, you said that you felt like collective ownership over a network couldn't work for certain reasons, and you seem to be saying that, it's because people get comfortable, people get greedy. Well, yeah, that's why we have democratic ownership of this. Look at PVN. Look at what we are. That's essentially what we're trying to do. If we democratize these industries and they are run by the people who genuinely want to make them better for the people, and not just to hoard profit and all that kind of stuff, but they democratically decide what to do with that profit, be it invested into the company or invested into new equipment or open up a new location instead of hoarding it. And, they can give themselves raises and controlling the means of production means you also get to control where the profit goes, right? Democratically. And because, everyone gets a say as to how the profit is spent, it's not hoarded. Therefore, you get rid of the incentive for people to be greedy. You get rid of the incentive for people to sit on their ass and do nothing. Because as long as there's not one person controlling all the wealth at the top, because we've talked about it before, the reason feudalism failed and eventually people just left it behind was because people realized, it's not that there's more bad kings than there are good kings. It's the fact that kings exist at all. You're absolutely right. So I genuinely believe that by getting rid of these very select oligarchs, by just democratizing these industries and not letting one person control all the wealth and control how the company's done, but rather let the people who make up the bones of the company be, the heads of the company's decision making. I genuinely feel like that's a better solution here. It's what we're doing on PVN, and I think we need to do that more across Canada. I think anyone who wants to go into media should definitely. People who are in media are more aware of capitalism corrupting the system than most other workers are, because they know that the whole point of being a journalist, the whole point of news is bringing the truth to the people and making sure that you're kept up with the rest of the world. But they understand more than anyone that money dictates what these companies do and how they cover the news and how and who they appeal to and all that stuff. And I genuinely believe that if you just dethrone those people who are making those decisions and make it so no one person can make those decisions, you can fix a lot of the problems that exist in modern media today in the West, even before we transition into socialism. Now, one other thing I wanted to quickly touch on before I go back to you was that when we talk about fascism in Canada and we accuse Trudeau of being a cog in the fascist machine, I'm not saying that Justin is going to Nazi rallies and throwing up Heil Hitlers everywhere and driving one of those obnoxious looking trucks with 6 Canadian flags on it for some fucking reason, which, by the way, is a huge hazard, especially in traffic. Don't fucking put flags all over your car. It's a fucking traffic hazard. But essentially, what we're accusing him of being, along with all liberals and centrists, is enablers. Liberals exist for the sole purpose of keeping the status quo the way it is. And the conservatives exist to make the status quo worse by making it better for the ruling class. That way, every single election, the wheel only turns one way. The liberals do not make any socioeconomic progress, because as capitalism regresses, we start to see these material conditions of the working class get worse and worse and worse. And the liberals like to disguise that. They like to disguise it by passing legislation that appeals to certain individuals' human rights. The liberals will do stuff like passing gay marriage and stuff like that. But and they'll do stuff like desegregating schools in terms of race. The liberals will do stuff like that. They'll make social changes wherever that is needed in order to keep up the illusion of progress. But as long as the capitalist wheel keeps turning, and as long as material conditions get worse, at the end of the day, all that social change can be thrown out the window, because the far right will rise out of the ashes of poverty. And using popularism or whatever, they'll take power eventually and, snuff out all that fucking progress almost overnight. It won't mean shit. And the liberals and the centrists always enable it, because instead of going over to the left, they just stay right the fuck where they are. And in some cases, they even move further right, but they still call themselves liberals and center leftists in order to keep up the illusion that they are the political opposition, right? Like in America, the Democrats of today are more conservative and right-wing than the Democrats from 20 years ago.
100%.
Right? Yeah, and they keep up the image of a false opposition. They are not. The times require for politicians to move further to the left if they want to truly make progress and empower the working class, but they don't do that. They can't do that because their corporate owners won't allow them to do that. So they can go ahead and pretend to oppose the conservatives all they want. When the time comes, they will 100% make a pact and give control over to the fascists, because at least the fascists won't affect the bottom line, which is preserving profit. That's how the Nazis, that's one of the ways that the Nazis gained power in Parliament. Which was it? Yeah, the incumbent party, the Liberal Party of the time, I can't remember its name, but it was like the status quo party. There were the communists and the fascists in Parliament, the Nazis. And and Germany had a very large left-wing presence, a very strong worker movement, right? And all that was snuffed out because the communists relied too much on the electoral process. And at the end of the day, the liberals sided with the Nazi party because they didn't want to affect the profit motive. They didn't want to affect the corporate status quo that gave them their money. Because let me tell you this, these liberals can go ahead and claim to be against far-right fascism all they want. When they hand over control over to the fascists, they're going to cry and stuff on TV, and then they're going to grab their briefcase and they're going to walk smiling all the way to the bank because they know that they still got their paycheck. That is what we mean when we refer to liberals as cogs in the fascist machine. We're not calling them straight up fascists. They are bootlickers. So go ahead.
So a little aside on there. So one of the terms I posted on social as well today. One Nazi at a table makes a table of Nazis. So if you allow one of these right-wing fascist idealists to overtake the narrative, that's your narrative. Your narrative is now, so Pierre Poilievre is basically he's a Hitler wannabe. I'll tell you straight up, we might get censored for this one, but it's true. This guy is in his yearbook quote or whatever was something about white nationalism or the white race. I'm like, how the hell did this guy not get taken out earlier? Like, because of the fact that people believe in this bullshit.
I don't know. It's almost as if holding someone accountable for their white supremacist past is in the hands, the responsibility of doing that is in the hands of the media that is also controlled by the same corporations that would benefit from far-right fascists taking power in Canada. I wonder what,
well, and then you have your police forces, and this one is going to be a very, it's going to ruffle the feathers of those right-wing fuckers, is the fact that the majority of your police forces across this country, nice Canada, are fucking fascists. And the proof is in the pudding in Calgary. The CPS were promoting their thin blue line bullshit badge that they all wore. Their regulation body came to them and said, okay, no, we have to remove that. They told them to fuck off and said, no, we're going to continue to use this thin blue line. We're going to continue to disobey your order. I'm going, so these are the guys that are designated or put in place to uphold law and order. We know how they uphold law and order. They shot to death a Sudanese man last month in broad daylight, claiming that he tried to attack them. And the fact is that they had a police canine member was injured in the attack, and they're saying that the guy had a knife. Well, it was proven that the guy had a stick. And if there's going to be a dog coming to attack me and I have a stick, I'm going to swing at I love dogs, but I'm going to swing at the dog to make sure it doesn't bite me. That's just my first reaction. So not only did they end up shooting him, but they shot, there was shrapnel that came from the shots from him that fucking caught the dog. But they're claiming that the dog was stabbed by the man who didn't have a knife. They left his body in the streets of Calgary for 6 fucking hours, wouldn't let the family or friends go towards it, and sat there and smoked cigarettes and drank fucking coffee, celebrating. Oh, but we're protecting you. We're keeping this a safe space. Safe from what? You murdered a fucking guy in broad daylight, and now you're protecting anyone from seeing this. So what was the narrative that was posted on Reddit and all those other fucking sites? Is the fact that you had right-wing fascist fucking blue lives matter bullshit people filming this thing of this guy going to the police. And then when the police go to shoot him, oh, the camera's been pulled away. We can't see that. I'm like, you're filming the guy being shot to death, but you're not going to film them shoot him. What's wrong with this picture?
It's very wrong. And by the way, I never heard of this story at all. If you could go ahead and find me the story.
Oh, I can send you the links
it
to the
me.
story,
I'll
and
post it out on Twitter. I'll post it
like
everywhere.
it's just disgusting what the CPS is doing right now. So, and here's the kicker on that. We go back to our original topic of Bill C-10 and Bill C-11 in that censorship piece. The Calgary Police Service, their chief of police, is paying members to monitor the social media sites for any anti-Calgary Police Service messaging. There is a black female activist, Taylor McNally, out of Calgary, is a black activist. Been connected with her for a few years now. She was shit beaten by an off-duty police officer and had dragged down by police outside a courthouse as she was protesting the fact that the police officer Dunn, who murdered another black person or had the death on his hands from the abuse that he caused to a person that was incarcerated. They were trying to call for justice against him and for him to basically be done. This off-duty female police officer fucking punched her in the face with a cell phone, and then fucking other officers jumped on top of her and were pulling her hair out as they're arresting her. I've got the video that was posted by one of her friends. They were protesting this. No other people joined the protest. 2 weeks after that, the government instituted these the mask mandates, or were removing C-19 regulations, and it was the Protect Our Province group that were trying to protect the kids for mask isolate from C-19. They were out protesting. Thousands of people were fucking protesting. Not one of them were there protesting this police officer. The Calgary Police Service is a fucking soldier militia group.
They're a militia, yeah.
They are absolutely a militia group. They're a right-wing radical group. There are fucking Nazi, white pride, basically KKK members that are protesting in Calgary every fucking Saturday, and these pieces of shit do nothing. But if someone who is anti-government or anti-establishment protest, they tackle them down and they punch the shit out of them, and there's no recourse, because who investigates them? The Edmonton Police Service.
This is all very, very scary when you put it into the context of Bill C-10 and Bill C-11.
100%.
Before I make my next point, all those stories that you talked about, find them, send them to me, tweet them out, and I'll tweet them out as well. So any viewers who want to follow up on those stories, because this is news to me, ADC and I will do our best to spread them all over our Twitter, and you can find us on Twitter at the handles beneath our heads, of course. And if you follow us there, we'll be able to share these stories. And please, if you come across them, please share them as well. And you know what? This is even more horrifying because, oh my God, of course, since the police work for the state, basically, that's what they do. It's their job, uphold the law, which is passed by legislators who are owned by the ruling class, right? Our legal system only protects the ruling class from harm from the working class. Essentially, when this kind of shit happens, when people are murdered in Canada by the police, oh my God, it does not get that much attention.
No.
Because I have CBC in the background right fucking now. I have them on in the background every other day, just so I can just listen to it while I'm doing my work and background noise and stuff. And I'll occasionally glance at the headline and I'll be like, okay, how fucked are we? Yeah, pretty fucked. Okay, I'm going back to my work. But I have never once looked at the CBC thing and have heard man shot by police, Sudanese man shot by police. That story is fucking terrifying. The cops will dead ass sick a dog on you to bite you and try to like maul you to death, and they expect you to sit still with your hands up and slowly lower yourself to the ground. And if you do anything, you're hostile, and they use everything on their tool belt to hurt or kill you. And it's cowardly that they don't want to show the actual killing. Same
See,
thing.
and this comes back to that censorship piece. Sorry to interrupt you, comrade,
No,
but
it's okay.
this is my frustration here in Alberta. So the centrists and the people that support the NDP, because I'm not NDP supporter. That's how Elections Alberta tagged me, and because of my anti-UCP, anti-conservative, anti-Kenny rhetoric,
Right.
I got deemed as an NDP supporter, that I was funding the NDP. Fuck the NDP. You're never getting money from me. You guys are a bunch of performative politicians that can go piss off. But that's who holds the power in this province. And anyone who wants to have clout, or anyone who wants to have media coverage and whatever, like there's a woman in Edmonton who's an ass-kissing NDP supporter who made the "fuck you Kenny" mug that went viral. I don't know if you ever saw that,
Yeah,
but there was so she made that. She's a capitalist cunt and did nothing to do anything in regards to actually standing up for people. Yeah, she 25% went to whatever. God, sorry, I have to stop talking about it.
You're cutting out a little bit. Hold on.
Hold on.
Your audio has been cutting out on.
How's that? That better?
Yeah. I haven't been able to properly hear what you've been saying for the
it's probably a good thing, because I dropped a few words that probably, I apologize to any of our female viewers.
I didn't. Wait, what? Oh.
That's okay. But anyway, so the whole concept is why you're not seeing these stories, comrade, is the fact that I post them, but they're not getting shared by anyone of clout or anyone of privilege. They're ignoring my messages because of the fact that I don't stand up with Better Off with Rachel here in Alberta, and I don't stand up for Trudeau or any of this bullshit of we can elect our way out of this poverty, because we can't. It's proven, like you said, that the wheel spins one way, and it's red, blue, red, blue, red, blue. Almost was orange. If it would have been orange, we wouldn't have this conversation, because it would have been a totally different animal there. Because I believe the only person that could have changed this country was Jack Layton. Unfortunately, he was dying of cancer at the time, and Stephen Harper stole the election. I'll say it straight every fucking day. I know you're watching me, Harper, and the rest of you pricks. You stole that election. You stole it like Bush stole the election against Gore. But anyway, the whole concept is that censorship piece. And if they continue with this bill C-10, and that means anyone who's going to lick the boots of the Liberals or lick the boots of the Conservatives, whoever is sitting in power at that time, because this little coalition that JT and Jagmeet have come together, it's not going to stop the right-wing lunatics of the thousands that were at the rallies last night in Edmonton and in Calgary. Like, this is where you want to, like, I was watching Black Klansman last night, and I love that movie, but I hate the movie because of the fact that in the 50, 60 years since that movie supposedly took place, nothing's fucking changed. We're still full of racists. We're still full of fascists, and they're just getting stronger because of capitalism. Capitalism's killing all of us. And until all of us come together against capitalism, we're just fucked. Like, it's just there's no way out of it until we break the system.
Yeah, like this goes all the way back to Bill C-10 and Bill C-11 will definitely feed into the rise of the far right, because then they'll be able to claim that they're the ones being censored, or because they have populism on their side, they'll be able to amplify their message. But essentially, these bills will make it increasingly difficult to publicly hold the state accountable, right? It's going to make it very difficult to expose the Canadian government for the absolute just disgusting pigs that they are. It's going to make it increasingly hard. And what Trudeau and Jagmeet are doing is they're basically just, dusting up the office and making everything look good for when the ultra conservatives eventually take power. None of these guys fucking care. None of these guys in power care about one another. Their beef is all fake. Jagmeet's beef with Justin is fake. Justin's opposition to the conservatives is fake. The conservatives hating Justin Trudeau is fake. It's all political theater because they all serve the same ruling class, especially when they make coalitions like this. And it's fucking disgusting. And my God, the direction this country is going scares me more and more every single day. And Canadians are so complicit with it.
Because they're sitting there watching fucking what's going on in the Ukraine. What people don't understand, and I'm going to say it again, I'm not taking either side. There's disgusting people on both sides. However, the Western propaganda of pro-Ukraine and pro-Zelensky is a fucking mistake. It's absolutely a distraction. This is Joe Biden's fucking war. This is the U.S. war on Russia and on the Eastern Bloc because he knows he can't fucking have power because China and Russia and India and all the fucking and North Korea even are too strong and will wipe out the Americans if fucking push comes to shove because they have the manpower and they have everyone together. And Biden knows this. Biden is senile as fuck. If you see him in recent
he just gives a speech and he turns around and he doesn't know where he is.
So whoever is running the Biden machine, because we knew it was bloody Rumsfeld before, and it was Dick Cheney in that whole machine with the painter Bush there painting in his bathtub or where the fuck he's doing now. When Bush and 9/11 happened, and this, we're going to hit controversy right now.
Oh, God.
What people need to understand, it can be fucking Trudeau, it can be Biden, it can be whatever. If these leaders of Western nations accept the death of thousands, hundreds of thousands of innocent people, why the fuck wouldn't they do it on their own home soil? What's stopping them from killing their own? This is what people aren't getting. I'm going right back to New York. You tell me straight up that New York situation, that poor bastard that's going away, he's going away because he was set up. He was set up by whatever, and everyone can say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Well, here's the thing. If you start to connect the dots, you will become a conspiracy theorist too, but the conspiracy isn't really conspiracy. It's actually a truth theorist, but you're too fucking scared or too stupid to want to know the truth.
For anybody who is wondering specifically about the New York situation, because there is a lot of talk about it, there's a lot of speculation around it, and I don't mean like the same kind of like Alex Jones conspiracy theorist stuff that was saying about the Sandy Hook shooting. A lot of different people have differing accounts of the shooting, and there's a lot of smoke around it, and there's a lot of unknown details, and that are just not being. The police are not being very honest. A lot of things aren't adding up, and there are a lot of people that have different perspectives on it. But I'd rather save that issue for next week because I'm going to cover Eric Adams turning New York City and New York State into a police state.
So for you to know on that one, the biggest thing and the biggest red flag for me is the cameras in the subway. If you've got that much, if you have that much technology, and our society is all about Big Brother, why the hell is there not video of that?
Yeah,
why?
The three cameras that happen to be in the same place as that guy where the shooting took place. All three of the cameras, despite the fact that the New York City subway system is wired with almost 1,000 cameras, those three at that specific time just happened to not be working.
Well, if the Property Brothers tell me that I can get a security system that I can be in Jamaica and use and see any camera on my phone, and they're shilling for capitalism, any of these private corporations that sell just your basic security cam for your house, and I can get footage anywhere, you tell me that a billion-dollar corporation as the city of New York doesn't have evidence. but we'll leave it. We'll leave it there.
We'll
I mean,
leave
we
it
go
there. Consider that a teaser into next week's.
but that's the big one. There is the cameras. Is those the evidence or the missing evidence, because the fact that there's something fishy going on. It stinks.
What essentially, I want to steer it back to Bill C-10 and Bill C-11 quickly, because we are nearing the end of the broadcast.
Yep.
We have around 11 minutes left. And I am going to make an appeal to any Canadians who are watching this, right? We all need to, and that video I showed you at the beginning of the broadcast with JJ McCullough, again, I may not agree with him, even though he is a very, very light, soft, moderate conservative, at least compared to the absolute nut jobs we have in the country now. But I agreed with him on the issue of Bill C-11 and Bill C-10. And I do agree with him when he says, get with your favorite YouTubers, your favorite Canadian celebrities, or whoever, and ask to stop Bill C-10 and Bill C-11. And I want to make that plea with the Canadian people now. Our country is not just not perfect. Our country is very fucked. We are dressing garbage with confetti and roses. That's what we're doing. This country is rotten to its core. And in order for us to transform it into the actual great country we want it to be, that we pretend it is, we have to face facts and address the real systemic issues of our nation, the crimes we've committed, the people we've hurt, the people we've murdered, the people we've been complicit in their murders, the people we cover for. We have to face all of these issues head on. And as capitalism continues to regress and the profit motive continues to dominate the status quo, and the material conditions of the workers are sacrificed more and more and more, the far right are just going to continue to seize power. This bullshit coalition in Parliament is not going to keep this country safe. If you are reassured that Canada will stay the Scandinavian utopia so long as the Liberals and the NDP have this big pact in Parliament, you're fucking wrong. The far right will continue to rise and influence the Conservative Party. And at some point, they will take power. And you're going to see your rights and freedoms slowly but surely start to disappear. And those radicals that we talked about, those ultra conservatives, those truckers, those people that we like to pay no mind to, and we're like, they're not Canadian. They don't represent the good, nice, clean Canadian image. Those people are going to be the ones who take power. Mark my words, at some point in the future. And when they do, it is not going to be pretty at all. So I'm making a plea with all Canadians. In order to keep that from happening, we must continue to expose the Canadian government for their lies, for their mistakes, for the things that they're complicit in, whether it be enabling fascists in Ukraine, whether it be supporting the United States in their imperialist agenda, whether it be us continuously hurting the First Nations people and digging up the bodies of their children that we murdered and covered up the murders of, whether it be our police when they murder and shoot minorities, which we like to get on the ass of the Americans a lot, but has been happening over here much more than Canadians like to expect. Oh, our cops don't shoot minorities. Yeah, they do. Please, we must oppose these bills, because in order for us to hold the Canadian government accountable, these bills must not pass. The Canadian government must not be shielded from criticism. And Canadian content, good Canadian content, is not content that promotes this country's image, this country's false image. It's not content that hides systemic issues in Canada. God damn it, it is content that are made by honest-to-God Canadians who want the best for this country, who will expose the rot of this country so we can cut it out and fix it. That is good Canadian content. So if you're Canadian and watching this, whether you be on PVN or anywhere else in Canada, take your phone out, go to TikTok, go to Twitter, I don't care, YouTube, make some content of your own. Make some content criticizing your local government in Canada. Whether you are like ADC and you have a very local beef to pick, the bone to pick with the local elected officials, or whether you be protesting against the federal government, or whether you be opposing Canada's actions in Ukraine or anywhere else, please, please do not let the Canadian government bury anti-government content. Being anti-government is not being anti-Canada. Being anti-government is being for the people of Canada, for the betterment of this country, for the betterment of its people. And our government do not represent us. They do not represent Canadians. No government in this capitalist system, especially in the West, represents their people. So that is my plea with everybody who is watching this. Stop Bill C-10 and stop Bill C-11. Fuck Justin Trudeau, fuck Jagmeet Singh, and fuck the PPC, and fuck whoever the fuck Pierre Poilievre. Fucking, I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry if I'm butchering it, but I genuinely don't give a shit. Stop Bill C-10 and 11. Stop it. That is going to be our show for tonight, and I'm very grateful for all of you coming out to listen. And you, ADC, I'm very thankful for you coming out on this broadcast tonight. And I'm glad that we were able to discuss Bill C-10 and all the ways that it could negatively affect Canadian society. Thank you for coming on, man. Genuinely.
Thank you, comrade. Just my last thing there is absolutely what we need is if you believe in people, if you believe in the human right is dignity, follow the PVN, follow us, help us grow. That's what help all of us that have the message, that are standing up. This isn't just a clout chasing event. This isn't just a mission. It's not just a movement. It's not just the new flavor of the week. We're looking for true change. And like Comrade said, we're scared of the right getting in power. We can't allow that. Some of us are going to fight the fuck of the right and make sure that they will get into power. But right now in the process, we have to ensure that we have the most truth sharing abilities that we have. So that is stopping Bill C-10. That is stopping Bill C-11, ensuring that we don't get caught in the same censored crap that some of the imperialist nations elsewhere are. And follow me at Left White North on Twitter. Go to ballergear.ca for merchandise and click on the link on the at Left White North. It goes to our sleek bio, which has all the links to our latest Left White North episode, as well as the link to everything PVN, which then you can support Comrade, you can support all of us there, because we need your help. We need everyone to come together, because united we stand, divided we fall. That's not just the catchphrase, it's the truth.
Hell yeah. Subscribe to the People's Voice Network YouTube channel. Follow ADC at Left White North, and follow me at Red Scared. You can also follow me on TikTok with that exact same name, except take out one of the D's in red. I know TikTok is just stingy like that.
Yeah, Angry Dead Canada for TikTok for me. So like you said, the sleek bio has got all the links there. And yeah, follow us, share this. I know it hurts. I know the truth really sucks. Honestly, I don't sleep at night because I spend too much time learning the truth. But the only way we're going to be able to change this and crush capitalism is to keep speaking the truth to power.
The truth hurts when it is revealed, but the truth will hurt even more when it comes out and you haven't talked about it before then. When the truth hits you in the face, that's when it truly hurts. So let's not let it hit us in the face. Let's nip it in the bud while we can. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Salud, and good night to everybody.